Good evening. It's Thursday, February 28th at 5 p.m. I'm Marty Baker, President of Council, and this is the Committee of the Whole Council assembled to discuss and ultimately determine Troy's participation in the Ohio Open Checkbook. Mr. Frigge provided us some initial information. I'll ask that electronic devices be turned off for the remainder of the meeting. However, we will begin tonight with a presentation by Ms. Lauren Bowen of the Ohio Treasurer of State's Office. Ms. Bowen?
Hi there. Good evening.
Good evening.
You can hear me okay? Wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to allow for me to come here and share this technology with you, this tool with you. It really means a lot to work with the city on this. This is something I'm really excited about, and so I'm eager to share with you what we've undertaken here. But I know that for Sue and Patrick and Auditor Frigge and perhaps even Mayor Beamish, that some of this might be repeat, but since this meeting is in the spirit of getting everybody on the same page and up to date on what we're trying to accomplish here, I thought I would start, by saying that this idea was something that Treasurer Mandel, who is our former state treasurer, undertook to put all of the state's expenses online. Across every state agency, you can track how your money is being spent. And that was accomplished back in December of 2014. And there's $500 billion that you can know down to the very last dime of how your tax dollars are spent at the state level. Well, having to have accomplished that, we wanted to circle around to local governments and have a conversation and work alongside of them to accomplish the same end within the local municipalities. And so that has brought me in front of all of you this evening, and I've met many of you, and of course others of you I'm meeting for the first time tonight. But again, I am Lauren Bowen from the State Treasurer's Office. So my idea was that I would just show you the product here that I worked alongside Auditor Frigge to build. We built this out of our office and constructed it so that your expenditure information is available on this digital platform. I have this here because I just wanted to note that this is not live yet, because we're not to that point where we're agreeing on. It's not been decided yet if it is going to go live, but should it go live, the public will land on this page, and this is the first pop-up box that you'll see where you can either get a tutorial or just get started. So that was an important feature I thought you should know about. But since I've been on many of these checkbook websites, I'm just going to get started. I'm your tutor tonight, for better or worse. Okay, so this is your landing page. I'm going to go over here. So over $202 million are tracked on this tool. That makes up 63,606 individual expenditures. Those expenditures are all listed down here. And we call it the Ohio Checkbook because it displays as if it's a check register, which we feel makes it very easy to read and understand and digest. I guess our idea was that, if you're at home and you're doing your own banking account, that you understand how to read a check register. So we wanted it to be clear and something that everyone could understand, and we incorporated check representations of each individual expenditure. Over here, all of your departments are outlined. So this is a very bird's eye view of expenditure information in the city of Troy stretching back to 2015, but we can certainly drill down and we can understand expenditures related specifically to the police department. And it readjusts the aggregate total, and then of course the number of transactions specific just to the police department. So in order to easily get to the piece of information that you're seeking out as a user, we wanted to incorporate this Google-style search bar because this takes you just a minute to arrive at an answer to a question you may have. For instance, if you want to know how much the police department spent on tasers, we can pull up that very specific expenditure item and, $46,961.10 on tasers back in 2017. If we wanted to do a more broad search across all the departments, we could do something like office supplies. And this is pulling up how much was spent on office supplies related to all of the different departments. Again, you can pull up the individual checks. One thing I really like is that you can click on the vendor, and then you're understanding how much was spent on office supplies with this specific vendor, and it's readjusting the total yet again. So with just a few clicks of the mouse, you can get an answer to a very specific question. I'm going to reset this. Perhaps you wanted to know what was spent at a specific vendor across all the departments. Now we're understanding what was spent at Verizon just in the police, fire, and MIS departments. So we can know that none of the other city departments did use Verizon as a vendor. Of course, we can break this up different ways. So now not only are we able to look at it from what was spent across departments, now we're looking at it broken down by funds. That can be represented like this. And so that across each year, you're seeing how much of the finite pie is being spent across these different funds. I really like to point this feature out too. I just think it's helpful. You can aggregate information. So here we have an inventory, a listing of all of the vendors that the City of Troy uses for various things. And really, that's the long end and the short end of the functionality of the Ohio Checkbook for the City of Troy. Our inspiration behind doing this was that we're trying to modernize and update the way public records are being offered up, and we just feel that having it be made available in a digital format and in a format that you can search in makes it easier to read and understand and ascertain answers to certain questions and specific questions. So we're really proud and we're so grateful to have worked with 1,122 communities on this throughout the whole state, specifically in your county. I'm in the process of getting the Village of Bradford up and running with this. They're wanting to do it. Miami County, the county, has expressed great interest, and I believe that they're nearly toward the point where they're going to publish their expenditures online via this platform. Already published are the Village of Fletcher, Tip City Schools, Casstown, Bethel, Covington, Bradford Library, Bethel Township, and Pleasant Hill. So we're very grateful to have worked with them, and we'll be grateful to perhaps add Troy to the list of participants here in Miami County.
All right, are there any questions from council members of Lauren on this particular application, or any other questions that she might be able to answer? Anyone? Okay. You want to come on up? Well, maybe we'll do this first. The council members that are in the audience, if you want to come up so we can hear you, yeah.
The public's usually really excited about this, but not that excited. They just jump out of their seat and start asking questions. Oh, the pointer?
The remote.
Oh, here we go. I do know the difference between a pointer. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Good. Okay. Council members, what is in our response? Yeah. Your name tags are in response.
I can go to my chair and just think everybody.
Marty just said we had to sit in our assigned seats.
Todd's special.
How special.
I can go over there, I don't care.
We can move your name tag.
Huh?
We can just
Okay.
move your name tag.
Is there any questions from council then at this point?
Yes. I have,
Mr. Twiss?
what about the security of the platform? Can any personal information be gotten of the cities or employees, or when that data is being updated, how secure is it?
It's a flat platform that's not connected in any way back to the city's accounting system. We're retrieving the data off of the city's accounting system. It's the same steps as if people were requesting public records anyhow. That's usually, in my mind, the way that perhaps the city would go about generating that data if someone asked for it anyway. So we're taking that data and populating this platform.
And do you have a percentage of citizens at other locations that are going on to the site? Do you guys track clicks? Do you track individual users? How's that tracked?
You can, as a city entity, log into a specific back-end portion of your site to understand usage, the amount of visitors, how long they're staying on the site, what time of the day they're going on, and even the region of the state or country that they're visiting from.
But there's no data out there showing these others how much usage of this.
We
Checkbook is
ask
being used.
sometimes when we're in just casual conversations with some of the governments we've partnered with.
And then the last question I'll let some other people ask. Are there any that have started the checkbook but have gotten off?
Nope. And this is a partnership, so you participate to the extent that you want to participate, and I am a phone call away, and if there were problems, we certainly want to troubleshoot those with you and accommodate you in any way. This is a partnership. You're in no way mandated to do it.
Mr. Heath?
Yes, ma'am. So to kind of piggyback off what he just asked, the concern, or maybe just a clarification, would be if there are not that many people going to use it, how intensive is it for city staff to put all of this in? If we're literally taking every time a car gets an oil change and having to put in thousands of items, and then we find out there are only 12 citizens using it, it doesn't seem like that's worth the time.
Right. It
Is
took...
that a question?
This is really nice to have had your platform built and constructed, because I can speak specifically to the amount of time it takes per your city here. And it took us 20 minutes to get the data off the system.
Okay.
And that was pulling 3 years. And on our end, we worked with that data outside of the need to interface with anybody here at the city to construct the platform. There was a question about when we did get the platform built, tax refunds and names being associated with tax refunds. That was simply pointed out to me. It took me 1 minute on my end to make that adjustment. So the time investment for the city was 20 minutes, outside of the discussions we had to get to the point where I was retrieving the data.
And that's what I was looking for. That's good to know that it's not a manual entry.
No, and then the updating is as frequent as everyone here at the table decides, or the auditor, Friggy, however often you decide you want to update it. We have entities that are not on an update schedule, and they don't update it as often as perhaps we'd like to see. I have schools that, in Bethel schools, they do it once a month. So I got their data last Friday.
And that process is that they just kind of click upload and it takes information we've already got and just puts it
Yep,
in.
it's a function in the accounting system here in the city that it's a very specific set of steps. And I even will be willing, any time of the day, morning, noon, or night, hop on a phone call with Auditor Friggy or the sweet gals that are in your office that work with you, and say, click here, click there, and then, that way they're not trying to be on their own, struggling through the steps.
I appreciate the clarification. That was an important
Thank
thing for me.
you. Appreciate you.
Ma'am, I think
Thank
the
you.
last question would be, is there a cost to this besides just the staff?
Nope, this is a shared service between state government and local government, so there is no cost for the city.
Thanks.
Thank you, appreciate you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, would you like?
Yes, I am. Mr. Friggy, have all of the answers to your questions here in the pros and cons been answered in your presentation or the paperwork that we have for the packet?
I'm not sure they're answerable at this point in time. They're just pluses and minuses for yes or no.
Well, then I'm going to ask them.
Sure.
Because I want answers to them. If I may, go down that checklist, circumvent anybody else having to ask the same question. And I'm going to concentrate on the cons side of this because the pros are very self-explanatory.
Sure.
So this will not reduce time spent on any public Freedom of Information Act that we may get from anyone in the public, or will?
I guess the way that I would encourage folks to view this is it's a different way to access public information. So this isn't information that isn't already public. Certainly, anybody can ask for it at any time for any reason, not have to tell you who they are, why they want it, so on and so forth. So this is just a different avenue to pursue that same information. I don't know specifically here in your city whether it would increase, decrease, have a particular outcome surrounding the adoption of this checkbook concept, but it's the people's money. It's there for them to know exactly how it's spent down to the very last dime. And in my mind, and I'm sure that other people share this viewpoint, if this is the way that they want to be able to access it, this is just the avenue through which they can pursue that data.
Procedurally, off of the FOIA type requests, is this going to cost us more time in assisting people to go through this?
See,
Yeah.
Where's technical support? Who's responsible for technical support? Someone says, hey, I'm trying to get this information. Who they calling?
We would help troubleshoot that in a
It would
quick
go to
minute.
state?
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
John and I, we've talked so many times. He knows, I hope you have my number programmed in your phone because that, I'm a phone call away. If there is an issue, a problem, you call me and I will help you troubleshoot it.
Well, that's not my question.
Okay.
The question was procedurally, are we obligated, if a resident or anybody gave us a Freedom of Information Act request, are we obligated to assist people in reading this and giving a tutorial and how to navigate these?
That's a good question. I'm going to give you a politician answer.
Okay.
I'm not an attorney.
Okay.
So I don't feel comfortable speaking to that.
Okay.
However,
That's fine.
I would assume that you could consult with your personal legal consultants
Right.
here And I'm assuming that they would tell you that if somebody's raising a question via the Ohio checkbook, that that doesn't count as a public records request.
Okay.
I have seen other cities address it that way, that it doesn't count as an official request. But I'm not an attorney, and I'm not your law, I'm not your law
I don't want you to
consultant.
overreach on that.
Yeah.
So if you have an answer, you have an answer. What is the positive and negative feedback from the governmental entities that are, looking into this or are on it as to ease of use or anything along that line? What's the positive and the negative?
We get the negative feedback before they adopt it. So, I mean, quite honestly, if I'm being very upfront, when we're circling back around to these entities, they say it's had no change in the way they conduct business with the public or conduct operations within their city, or that it's been helpful. Perhaps they're telling me what I want to hear. I don't know, maybe I'm that charming, but that is, that's the honest truth. I mean, of course, prior to adopting, we get all kinds of questions and uncertainties raised about it, but.
Well, what I'm kind of getting at is any negative feedback as to the ease of use of the program?
I mean, maybe in my meetings, we don't specifically touch on the ease of use. It's just so second nature to me now that maybe that doesn't even come up. And I don't get any negative comments that it's very extremely difficult. I mean, there is a tutorial. I think a lot of people in this city that, in the local government setting that end up adopting this make themselves available to maybe help constituents. And then I personally love sitting down with both elected officials, city officials, and residents and members of the public to help them if they need help on it. But we get very little requests as to, needing further education or insight about how to navigate through the functions.
Moving along then, how is the state going to be using this information? That's up.
The state won't be using the information. I mean, I may get on the City of Troy's website just to.
But they'll have access to our information.
But they have access to it now.
Yeah.
I mean, the man on the moon could call Troy tomorrow and say, hey, Sue, can you give me all the public expenditures stretching back to 2015? What would you have to say?
Yes.
I'll get back with you.
So with that being said, if somebody from the state wants to call Sue and say, I want all of this, they could do it now, whether you do the Ohio checkbook or not.
Okay. As far as our city income tax collection, excuse me, do we have privacy stuff set up so that no one's social security number,
Yes.
name, address?
We have sat in a room with the auditor staff, Auditor Friggy, Patrick, and Sue, and we looked at it to make sure that there was none of that in there. But the way we're pulling off the data from the accounting system, it does, that specific data set that's housed in your accounting system would very rarely contain a social security number. But should it, by some really unusual, circumstance, that's why we have the review session to make sure.
So no one would be able to get into either individual or business accounts or returns or things like that?
No, because it's not in any way interconnected with your accounting
And their
system.
names wouldn't be on there?
The,
Names of the company, the name of an individual?
if they're a paid vendor,
That's coming up.
yeah.
I'm getting to that.
Not taxing.
Not tax. It wouldn't say, here's, we got this tax payments.
Bill Twist paid this much
Yeah.
in tax. That's confidential information.
The only side of that is if there's a tax refund, and we've addressed that, we will not have that information in this system.
No.
To individuals or businesses.
You have my assurances, no.
Have there been any potential issues or where people have come back and on the outside of the city government that have put any pressure on vendors that a particular city or governmental agency is dealing with, whether good, bad, or indifferent, that having access to all of our vendors, which I guess they could ask and find
Yeah.
out, which is good, but, sometimes those things are, you get negative
Comments.
nut jobs that will want to address particular company X, Y, or Z.
Honestly, not to my knowledge. Perhaps it's one of those things that I'm following up with these local governments that have participated in having these conversations, and I would think that if that was problematic and a frequent enough occurrence, that these relationships I have with these cities and local entities I've worked with to get these sites constructed and built and published, that they would be telling me that. So I have to assume that doesn't happen, but
You briefly touched on this and about governmental agencies that are not regular in their updates, some doing it on an annual basis and some doing it on a monthly
I
basis.
honestly think sometimes they forget. I think that this operates in the background, and they're not getting very many probably public records requests anyway, and it's just not something that occurs to them. I think, we like to help in any way possible to keep these sites updated, but it is their choice. This is an optional government program. They get to post as much or as little data on it as they want.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes, ma'am. I think you said before, but the state runs this site.
We partner with you to build it. And we are posting the data on a platform that we're helping the city to construct for the purposes of housing public expenditure records. So we work with you to update it, keep it, in good working order, help you troubleshoot any concerns. But we don't control the way we look to you to get your advice on how the information's represented or what specific expenditures say. And
Okay. Is it housed on a state website? Is it housed on a city website?
it's your own unique website. It's a unique URL for the city of Troy. So it says cityoftroy.ohiocheckbook.com.
But is it on your servers or our servers?
It's on a server.
asking the wrong
It's an
question.
independent server no, it's not on your server or our server.
It's the cloud.
Yeah, cloud. Thank you. It's in the
There's a
cloud.
third party hosting the service.
Yeah, correct.
So would there be a link on our webpage?
I hope so. That would be nice. I would love to.
TroyOhio.gov webpage?
Yeah, I would. A lot of the bigger entities that work with us on this end up linking their Ohio Checkbook platform to their website.
Does the little thing come up in the URL where it's a secure website?
It's a secure, yep.
Okay. What's the largest city you have that's doing this now?
Cincinnati's on it, Columbus is on it. Our biggest entity that houses the most data is Cuyahoga County, with Columbus Schools being the second. Dayton's on it. I'm trying to think of the big cities. Toledo,
You kind of covered it.
yeah.
And, and I think Findlay, Ohio's on this also.
Yep, they sure are.
I have nothing else, Madam President.
Tom, anything?
Not at this time.
Bill?
A question, and then maybe a comment or a question. I think my question is, this is probably not a very good tool to compare community to community, because each one's under their own accounting system. Would that be correct?
I would say that there are complications with being able to offer up comparisons because, office supplies may be labeled equipment in another community. It may not be so much the functionality of the accounting system that prevents the accurate comparisons, more so the labeling.
Okay. My second question, has there been any thought or discussion about enhancing the system to put like measurable metrics into it as well? So for example, the park department spent X amount of dollars, but with that X amount of dollars, these were the X number of pieces of park equipment that were improved, or
Absolutely.
number of trees that were cut down.
I'm so glad you asked. So when we work toward getting this up and running for the city, we can add a saved view and we could narrow in on just what are the expenditures related to your parks department. And on your platform, I didn't point it out and it's already turned off, but there was a hanging budget document and another document that was there. We could add some dialogue or narrative about that and about what the park levy went to pay for specifically. And we could create the saved view as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, it's one thing to say this is what our dollars were spent for. I think it's a different thing when you say, well, this is the concrete objectives that were met with the dollars that were spent.
Definitely. And those are important conversations and important narratives. And the genuine hope is that we work with you to be able to highlight some of those things.
That's all I had.
Mrs. Zoda?
To dovetail on Bill's point, are there extra costs
No.
on any of those items?
Nope. And I will hop on a phone call with John Otter Fricke, whenever you prefer, and I'll help with that.
So that there are no other additional optional extra fees?
No,
Tax license,
not to
ferry
create a
charges.
saved view to the point that he's speaking to.
Not at this time.
For modification of anything
No,
such as council
no,
license?
what Mr. Lutz, you're hoping to achieve with the checkbook, Councilmember Lutz, what you're hoping to achieve with the checkbook, no, that would not be an extra cost.
Okay.
Mrs. Zoda?
I yield my time back.
Just to clarify that, are there any cities, any public entities that are on the checkbook that have paid extra fees? And what would those extra fees be?
We do have, not to our office and not because of the expenditures that are posted. We do have some that opt to post revenues.
I know
in addition
Faber Heights is one that
Yes.
opted to do that.
To do that.
But those extra fees do not go to you. That is the other platform that they add to that.
It's an added fee, it's an added dimension to their platform that they have chosen.
Okay.
And I don't know the costs or why or
But
how
they've linked it
much.
through their Ohio checkbook site.
Yep, it's just an added layer to what they're offering on the expenditure side.
This is something that I have wanted to see the city do since 2014. It has taken us this long to get to this point. I'm thrilled that we're here tonight. I called Jim Bell at Heber Heights several years ago and talked to him about their site. He said, I don't know why a community wouldn't do this. Heber Heights has taken the extra step to add, like we just said, they've added 2 extra things that I'm aware of to their site that they paid extra money for because they believe in this transparency so much. I've not talked to anybody that's had any issues with it. We talk about user-friendly. Is it user-friendly? Is it not? I think people will get used to it. Have any of you been on the Ohio Checkbook and played with it? Get on there and play with it. It is so easy to use, and I think the people of Troy will appreciate it. It's not hard to use. Some people are going to have more difficulty with it than others. I don't have any questions. Like I said, I've been looking at this since 2014, so I've had all my questions answered. It's a good program.
Is it my turn even though I'm out of spot?
Yes, Todd?
Mr. Sievert?
Thank you. I would probably respectfully disagree with Ms. Oden a little bit. Here's my questions for you.
Sure.
Number one, everything's already readily available. You would agree with me on that, correct?
It is readily available.
Okay.
It's
And-
public record.
Okay, and you would agree with me that state funding for municipalities sometimes involves the financial health of the community?
I'm going to be really honest. I work at the state treasurer's office, and the state legislature, I'm sure,
let's
has
assume
all
that
kinds of ideas about how to fund and not fund and local
Let's assume
governments.
that it does, okay? So then the question becomes, would this have a deleterious impact on our funding because it now becomes available on a statewide forum?
Well, I mean, if it was going to have an impact on your funding model as it exists now, it already would be because the state can already get the information.
But they have to call and do that.
No, we can email, we can
Okay, but-
request it be sent to a PO box.
I would like Mr. Friggy's comments on that. Do you think that this will have any impact on the availability of this information to our funding?
Mr. Siebert, we've responded to all public requests in a timely manner. This will allow somebody to navigate on their own. I don't know that many people will. It may raise questions in their mind, and we may have a public request that we have to do from this.
So it
Open
could
checkbook.
increase the,
If that's the case, we'll certainly take care of it. We take care of them in a timely manner as they come up. Can I just take a minute to?
yeah,
Yes.
We've won awards for 30-plus years for transparency, for being good stewards of the taxpayer money. We, again, answer all public record requests. My department doesn't care whether we're on this open checkbook or not. We will not function any differently. We have never hidden anything from the public and never will hide anything from the public. It's entirely up to you, council members, whether we do this or not. And again, we don't care.
how many public information requests do we average a year for finances?
Sue, can you answer that?
Gosh,
3 or 4 a year, maybe?
Oh, I would say maybe more than that, because a lot of requests have financials in them, so maybe 10, 12, I don't know.
Okay.
So one a month.
Yeah, and we do get requests often from vendors or suppliers who are looking for vendors' names. Yes, that is true. And those are usually the printouts themselves.
But not for the finances, they're just
It
looking
is,
for...
it's part of the finance system because.
No, I understand, but they're
They're
looking for a vendor.
looking for a vendor, but they're also looking for amounts.
What, because I get confused on this all the time, and I don't know if it would be confusing for the public if this comes in. What is are we a year accounting? Are we an accrual method accounting? How do we do our accounting for the city?
It's fund accounting, and it's very confusing,
Okay.
to say the least.
Well, and that's my point, because that's, I mean, even in I'll use the Troy Rotary, we have a $1,000 deficit, but it's not really a $1,000 deficit because the secondary pot has $1,000. So it just hasn't been it hasn't been synthesized yet. Would the public be confused by this information based upon their, I don't want to say lack, but based upon the way that we do our accounting?
Quite honestly, Mr. Siebert, I'm confused on how we do our accounting. But it is a different type of accounting, yes. It's not
general
debits
business
and credits.
accounting.
It's not a debit here and a credit there.
But the fund accounting practices have nothing to do with the Ohio checkbook. The Ohio checkbook is detailing expenditures paid to Staples, Ace Hardware, your certain vendors, debt payments. It's a listing of specific expenditures and bills that the city pays. So it's connected to funds and what funds are spent out of so that you can know how much the police department spent in a given year. But it's not meant to detail these fund accounting practices. It's an itemized, detailed expenditure information of what the city spends every last dime of taxpayer money on.
I have one more quick question. Who makes and I think you've already answered this, and this will be my last question.
Sure.
Do you choose the update time frame? Like, is that an administrative question that we would do that? I mean, council wouldn't say we're going to do this and update once a month, right? I would assume, do it annually.
That's administrative. That would
That's
be administrative.
Question. So my question then, is there anybody that hasn't, because you kind of answered it, but you didn't really respond, at least I didn't understand it. Is there anybody that has joined your organization and not updated at all? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
And what's the frequency of that? Can you give me a percentage?
I cannot right now. I mean,
because obviously if you don't update, it's not worth it, right?
well, and we work with 10 different accounting systems across 3,962 local governments. 1,122 are signed up, so it's just each of these unique entity types are going to have their own personalities, their own situations. I mean, I have very pleasant experiences working with local governments on the Ohio Checkbook, and I have very good relationships with these people, very good working relationships, and for most of them, I feel like we are able to update in a very timely, efficient manner. For the one here and there that may not be reaching out to me for help or may forget about it, I can't speak to why that is. I don't know.
But you would agree that it's only as good as the update?
We very much hope that the entities keep their sites updated.
I don't have anything.
Question?
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Are you it for the state as far as working with these 1,000 different communities?
I have a coworker Taylor Wright, that she helped. You know, we're in the trenches together, and a director of the program based out of Columbus. So there's 3 of us.
So there's 3 of you overseeing.
Mm-hmm. And then I have the blessing of working with really good people, really talented people. They're team players, and of course, if there was ever a need, I'm sure that we would band together and rise to the occasion. But there's 3 of us that do this day in and day out. And yes, this is a major concentration of mine.
Okay. Okay. From the standpoint of, you know, I understand this to be transparency, but what I'm hearing from our auditor is that we're really transparent already. Correct? Right?
We are. This would be an additional step in the transparency.
Yeah. I guess my confusion is how is this
Because it's
better than what we're doing?
I understand. No, that's a fair question. We're modernizing and updating a process. Right now, if somebody wants a public record, they're either going online, they're looking at a flat file, they're digging through hundreds of thousands of transactions to try to figure out how much was spent at Staples on February 14th of 2015. With this, it's a searchable database. It's accessible online, so people can do it 24/7, and they're able to use the Google-style search bar and arrive at the answer to the question they have in a very short amount of time. So it's efficient, and for some people, it's just preferable. Some people may prefer the current method, and they like to come and ask, and they like to have the conversation and interface, and that's wonderful. I wouldn't deter anybody who wants to pursue public information via the current means to not do so. But with this, it's just another option. It's a convenience. It's maybe mitigating the need to jump through certain hoops, or maybe it's easier for some people to read the bigger print online. I just think that when we're in the business of public service and people are trusting us with their hard-earned money, and they want options as to how they can access information about government, that this is just a way to honor that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think when you ask for public records through the normal system that we've been used to, it has to be a specific request. You can't just go in and browse through and say, these are all the expenditures for the police department. You have to have a specific request that they're going to be able to pull for you. And so I think this opens it up a little bit as far as making it more, like she says, user-friendly, more, browsable type of system.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Schweizer, you had another question?
Yes, ma'am. You said there's how many different communities that are on this now?
1,122 as of yesterday.
Is-
Oh, and I published one today, so that's up to 1,123.
Excellent.
A library, Bucyrus Library, went live this morning.
Is there a way for you to take a look at all these different checkbooks and put them together? Is there a way to melt them all together so that you can see expenditures,
Sure.
and revenues for all the different
And
1,000?
aggregate them all together? No, because of the variable, if everybody was on a uniformed accounting system and Troy used the same accounting system as the Village of Fletcher, which you don't, Village of Fletcher's on UAN and you're on a different accounting system, we could, but no, at this time, not unless we put some really, a lot of thought into it, or not to my knowledge right now, no.
And Huber Heights may call push pins general accounting, and we call it from state.
Correct.
But it would be down, I mean, it wouldn't go that far into the weeds, but would there be a way for them to do something like that? Not today and not tomorrow. Maybe in the future. I mean, who knows what direction this will take and how it becomes more, usable to the public, and what application that it takes on in these different communities. Okay.
I guess the sky's the limit.
Why would you do that, John?
I don't know. I don't know if I want anybody out there doing that.
Oh.
With all that information and looking at all that money.
I have another question.
Can I ask one more, Phil? Did you say that there is no cost to the city on this?
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Lutz?
I'm just curious, of the 1,123 participants, are most of them cities, are they villages, are they townships?
Most of them are townships. But to be fair, townships are the most prevalent government type.
Correct.
On around once more through. Mr. Twist?
So to use the example of the police tasers, if we had an Ohio grant to pay for those, it will only show that we spent $46,000, but it won't show there was a grant to cover that at zero, correct? What my understanding is the checkbook is basically, here's the line items, that's all there is to
Yeah.
it. There's no
Right.
revenue to come back, or grants, or someone else paid for that, or there's no credits being issued.
This may be a really silly way to explain this, but this is my favorite way to explain it. It's like when you go to Kroger and you get your milk and your bread and your eggs and your treats and things, you have an itemized receipt. $5 on milk, $5 on eggs, so on and so forth. This is kind of that concept. Yeah, it's just breaking down how much was spent on what.
Mr. Heath?
Yes, ma'am. So just as a general feeling of the whole thing, so there are 1,000-some organizations on this. Back with one person doing most of these meetings, I assume like you're the person.
Yeah.
So if it took 1 to 2 meetings to do this, I mean, you're up to like 2,000 meetings, right? I mean,
I've done
all
hundreds
across
of
the state.
meetings.
Yeah,
I've
so-
done I call my car the Ohio Checkbook.com mobile.
There you go.
I got that car in 2013 with 6,000 miles on it, and today it's up to 191,000 miles on it, and we only drive it for this job.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So, and the reason I bring that up is like, so the state of Ohio is putting money, resources, full-time people into this. You've had thousands of meetings. Okay. Why? Like, why does the state of Ohio care whether we use this or not? So much to the point where they're sending people to thousands of meetings across the state. Is it like
I mean, you
bragging
asked-
rights to other states or what? I don't understand why you care.
This is a priority to the treasurer's office. This is a priority to Treasurer Sprague. He said recently of the checkbook, it's people's right to know how their money's being spent. I guess from my personal point of view, I'm really invested in this and I really care a lot about it because I think that people shouldn't have to ask for information they have a right to know about. But, I think we all just have our different feelings, but this is a priority to the state because it's good government, and we're here to serve the people, and we're here to do right by them, and it's not our money. It's their money, and we've got to help them know that when they're giving us thousands of dollars of their paychecks every year, that it's being put to good use and that they can trust us with it.
So that's the kind of the fly on the wall. If we went back to the first meeting and said, wow, we're going to dedicate people and vehicles to this and time.
I guess
this is a benefit to the citizens of Ohio.
It is. It's a matter of principle.
Okay. Thanks. That answers my question.
Thank you.
Mr. Siebert?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to go back to your milk, bread, and egg scenario that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Here would be my concern, and maybe you can address that. If I put what I paid for milk, what I paid for bread, and what I paid for eggs online, I'm going to open myself up for the competitor for milk to say, hey, I can sell you milk for cheaper.
Yeah.
I can sell you bread
Well,
for cheaper.
that's good. Don't you want to pay less for milk?
Yeah, except you talk about it doesn't take any more time, but Ms. Knight, Mr. Friggy, Mr. Titterton are going to have to respond to each one of those
They
solicitations.
don't have to.
Well, sure they do. I mean, you're not going to get a letter that says, hey, I can sell you milk for cheaper and not say, I want to look into that, right? Mr. Funderburg spent his time looking into that. I guess if you want to know how much just follow me in this logic. If I want to know how much the city pays for milk, I can do a Freedom of Information request and say, hey, how much did you pay for milk?
Right, the vendors would already be asking
And the vendor
anyway.
will know that. And then I can make a decision whether I want to go and pay more for milk, right? But in order for me to do that, I have to have the entrepreneurship and the desire to say, hey, I want to call and look and see what that is. Here, I'm going to have a list that's going to tell me here's everything that has been paid, and I can then go and say, okay, I want to do that. I mean, you can almost make like a third-party niche company here that's going to go through and look and say, hey, here's everything that we do, and we're going to go and try to solicit and underbid people for projects.
I've got to believe that today, which Troy is not on the checkbook today, hopefully they will be soon, but today they're not. But I was in the business of making money and generating a profit to feed the families of the people that worked for me as a company, and I took that business seriously, and I was going to make money off of calling Sue about getting the City of Troy's business. I've got to believe I would already be doing that. Would this maybe increase that a little bit more? I don't know. We haven't gotten that feedback from other governments, but I guess just speaking, kind of trying to get in the head of a business owner and salespeople, I gotta believe they'd already be asking Sue.
So in your larger municipalities, you haven't seen any of that? There hasn't
We don't
been
we don't, like I said, I follow up, I have really good relationships with these people. I feel like we have honest conversations, and that's not anything that I hear anything about when I'm talking to
How about
folks.
the inverse? In smaller communities, do you ever hear, oh, why'd you buy your paper from Western Ohio Graphics and not Core Graphics? Do you ever hear people that because now, which is, I understand it's public information, but it's not readily available.
No,
So
it's not
do you ever
available
hear,
for Spingle
do you ever
fingertips.
hear where it creates situations where in a smaller environment that people are concerned because the city or the municipality is doing business with this entity and not with another entity?
Todd, there's nothing keeping the businesses in town now from coming to the city and asking if they would consider doing business with them. Even now, there's nothing keeping them from doing that.
Well, except their own initiative to come and do it, as opposed to it being put out on a public forum.
But it's going to take their initiative to go in and look at it anyway. I mean, that's still an open, I would hope that those companies are coming to the city now because we don't want to spend any more money.
I know if I can save money on milk, I really do want to.
We don't want to spend any more money than we have to on paper supplies, for example. So, as a city, so I would hope that the companies are in town are competitive enough that if they're looking at a large, I know that they did at larger companies that I've worked at. I mean, the different companies would come and basically bid or tell you what their price was. So I
Right,
think,
but they have to
hope
do that,
they would
and
do
and
that.
I think that there is a leap there between you having to come and see, did I use Staples or did I use Browers, versus, hey, I can hit this button and say, I'm Browers, I'm a locally owned office supply company, and the city's buying their stuff from Staples. Now I'm mad because I'm a little local vendor and you're buying stuff from Staples.
I would bet that Browers already know exactly who they're going to.
I just was using that as an example.
I know, but I'm just saying that that's, Robin?
Has anybody ever backed out and said, we're done with this, no more?
No, we've never taken down a site off of the Ohio Checkbook. We've never disengaged a site.
And I will also say it is linked through through the state treasurer's office. Every city, every township, every library, every court that has this, every cemetery that receives, I'm just listing things that I've seen. If you go to the Ohio Checkbook on the treasurer, it lists every city, township, village, every entity that is on this.
Yep.
Is there a contract with this? Like,
No.
when we sign on, do we have to sign on for 5 years?
You don't
or
sign
anything
on
like that?
anything.
No, okay. So if we would do this and we would find adverse effects and
Right.
we're not happy with
John,
it.
Auditor Bridges
John,
calls.
right,
Yeah.
he could call and tell you to take it down tomorrow if you needed to.
Yes.
So we have the reverse option if we would need to
Yeah,
do that.
because it's
for
an
any reason.
optional program. It's optional for you.
Okay,
It's your decision to do it, and it's your decision not to do it.
all right. Mr. Kendall?
Yeah, I just, if I may, Patrick, if we were to go this way, how do we tell the world we're doing this? Very important.
I think Lauren will take care of that.
I'll throw a parade at downtown Troy. You're all invited.
Yeah, I don't know that we worry about the media part of it. The state would help us with that. However, if you give John the guidance to do this, I think, John, you're the one who asked the question earlier about the website. We have had a couple of meetings on this just to try to understand what the information is and really how the information might be interpreted. I think that was our initial hesitation. Not that everybody gets the information, because it would probably streamline a lot of our requests that Sue and others get. Because, Marty, you mentioned it a little while ago, that you have to be really specific. Well, you do, but you don't. You don't have to be super specific, but when you're not specific, you could get 2 inches of paper and pay 5 cents a page. So it behooves everybody to be able to narrow that down. But when you narrow it down and you only have so many columns of information, it could be easy to misinterpret or not understand the background of those items. And so that's our concern, that somebody would get it, compile it, and then think that we're buying $1 million worth of Staples when there's a lot more to it. It kind of goes back to the question about whether we receive grants to offset the tasers or we're paying the whole thing. So a roundabout way of answering your question is we would definitely want to have some easy access point on our website that says open checkbook, sends the folks to the cloud, to that website, tells them that this is an exterior site, you're leaving the government site, but we'd have to talk to our IT, and I think we can do it, is when they hit the button on the website to go to this site, that there would be kind of an interim page or an intermediate page, if you will, with some disclosures or disclaimers that say something like, this is our expense information. If you have any questions about the information, call us. If you have any difficulties navigating it, call them.
Yes.
Okay. Because we won't know how to do that. But we would want, that would be our caution. We would want, if people are going to use it, that they take the time to look at all the information and try to understand it before they interpret it. It's already out there. This makes it a lot easier for people to get it, but also a lot easier to not misuse it, but misinterpret it. And so we'd want to, as our part of the advertising and our part of helping roll that out, we would want to have that kind of information out there before people dove into it.
Thank you.
Mayor, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I've been listening to all the discussion. There are lots of advantages with the transparency, but I go back and I really want to, there's been many auditors in the city of Troy over many years, and John is the newest auditor and has been in his position for a number of years. What I want to make clear, and I think he shared that, is over those many, many years that the state auditor has come back, and other audits that we have done with clean audits, and many with distinction, which says we're doing something right. And it's for taxpayer dollars, good stewardship of taxpayer dollars. And I think that needs to be said, first of all. That's the part of the transparency I think we should be proud of. Every year, we've heard this from, and in fact, state auditors have come forward and actually handed us the awards personally because we have been a city of distinction. Now, saying that, I just think we need to understand we're doing something right, or we would be cited for lots of different things of taxpayer stewardship, taxpayer dollars being used wrong. My only concern, and Lauren, you and I know each other, in a negative society that we live in, this is just me saying, would not this, you could have that negative society, nickel and dime certain issues. You mentioned staples, the staples, where they could say, well, gee, you just spent $34 on, I don't understand why. And then it falls back to the staff to respond. Somebody has to respond to that. I guess my concern we got a lot to be proud of in Troy, Ohio, and you know that. You presented those awards to us.
I've grown up just south of here, and I've visited this community many times during my childhood throughout. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever ate one of those strawberry donuts was with you.
Yes. Yes. And that's why I say you've been
yes,
you know this.
Community.
And I think everybody around here and everybody in the community should realize, number one, what Mr. Frigge said early on is for years we have come with clean audits of stewardship and taxpayer dollars. My concern is we also live in a negative society where nickel and dime things become issues.
Yeah.
And I'm worried, that's my worry. Would this not allow for that to happen? And if so, will that in turn cause us, as a lot of people have asked today, more staff time to respond on those nickel and dime issues? Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense.
And I think that, as she said, we're not locked into this forever and ever. If we find that it's creating too much staff time to handle it, or it's, we're having to add staff to take care of what this has created, then I think, it's up to us to say, okay, I think we need to pull this because we can't, maintain it. So we're not under, as I understand it, any kind of contract.
And I heard you say that, and I agree with that.
And I think
I'm not again, I think there's a lot of advantages and there's transparency. I just think we need to all, around this table and in our community, to realize if we were doing something really, we're not hiding anything. We have been transparent, and all of our audits say that to us. Somehow that needs to go out forward as well, that we're doing something right.
You are doing
all
it,
this is doing is showing what we're doing right, which goes back to, it's that.
It's a public service, it's a convenience. It's not that Troy is doing anything right or anything wrong. It's a preference that people have to be able to look at public records online in a searchable database.
But you haven't seen, in your traveling around, that in our society, there's those who would just look at one little item, and then that becomes an issue, a focal point, and then that takes staff time. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, not really, but I guess that my point to that would be that we all know people that nitpick and are difficult and want to point out negative things. I certainly know them. I know that you all have encountered people that may not embrace positivity to the extent that you and I like. However, I just encourage people to realize or think about this in a way that, hundreds of people that are good, upstanding people that aren't negative, that aren't going to complain, that aren't going to nitpick, get on there just out of sheer curiosity. And why should the one that is going to be, a pill about it, deter the city from doing it?
Well, I see advantages, obviously, by showing, because we're doing something right. I have no secrets about that. But I do worry about those few.
Yeah, you can't let the few ruin it for the rest of us. I always used to hate getting in trouble in school because the very few were acting up, and then I had to,
all the time.
Right, I had to skip recess because a few kids were acting up.
Yeah. Mr. Lutz,
Yeah,
you have a comment?
I completely agree with what you're saying, Mayor. But when there's an opportunity for a question to be answered, there's an opportunity for us to tell a story. And it can be a very, very good story. If somebody says, hey, we spent $50,000 on tasers, well, then we have an opportunity to tell a story. Hey, do you know we were one of X number of communities in this state to get a grant to pay for those tasers?
And I agree.
One of our biggest challenges as a community is we're not telling those types of stories as well as we could.
Agree with that too.
There's a lot of good things happening around here, and this gives us an opportunity to tell those types of stories.
And that's my point.
Okay, one more.
We've sort of beat this
Right.
to death, I think. And if I may, I'd like to make a motion that we give a positive guidance to Mr. Friggy to go forward with this.
Okay, I think, as I understand it, we will need to take, kind of a vote tonight to see if everybody agrees with that. And then at council meeting, we would have a report.
There would be a report.
And maybe a motion and a second. Or we can check with Mr. Kerber to see how he wants to proceed with it.
And I think he said that there would not be legislation.
Right, no legislation, but in order to formalize it at a council meeting is what I'm saying, is to just, okay. So, can we just do a roll call now and a yes means that we want to direct Mr. Mr. Friggy to, Mr. Friggy to proceed. So, Mrs. Knight, do you want to go ahead and
Call the roll.
roll call?
Mrs. Oda?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Swazer?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Heath?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
No.
The motion is approved. The roll call is unanimous. Not unanimous, but.
We appreciate you having the patience with us
It was
tonight and
lovely.
answering all of our questions.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time and hearing me out about it. It
And
means a lot to our office,
It means a lot to me, and we're extremely grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments this evening? Mr. Friggy, thank you. Did you have any further comments?
No, ma'am, we'll take care of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
It's up here that she produced on the 15, 16, 17 years, was it? That's already there?
It's already in our, it's contained here. It's
Okay.
not in,
It's draft stuff.
It's
Yeah,
just a draft.
Gotcha, all right.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
So it would start with 2019 and move forward. Go forward, or would you put historic information?
18.
So the site that I showed you tonight was the test site that we all looked at over the summer. It's the test site. It's not live and available for public consumption.
Right.
When we make it live, we'll take the steps to make it live and available for public consumption.
Okay. Thank you.
My thinking is these 3 years will be live when we say go.
Yep, when
and then
you-
we'll update it for 18 as quickly as we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.